Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to Room by Room, the home organisation Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element, with expert knowledge from professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Joustra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we're going to be exploring the impact of poor indoor ventilation on performance and health. And today we're going to be talking to Sotirios Papathanasiou, who is an air quality expert. Hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you. So before we get started, do you mind introducing yourself so we get to learn a little bit more about who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sotrios. I'm actually an electronic engineer, but I have been working in the air quality industry since 2014, as I used to collaborate with companies in the development of air quality monitors, mainly for indoor spaces.
Interesting. It seems, to me, not an interesting jump between, I guess, engineering to air quality. How did you make that choice?
Because I understood that there is a need to see what's going on with the air quality, and sensor technology is going to allow us to do that. Because most of the pollutants out there are invisible to the naked eye, so we need technology in the rescue.
Okay, interesting. I'm a bit worried about what I'm going to learn today, what invisible pollutants are lurking around me. But before we dive into that, we're going to do a section that we call Have You Met Sotrios? And that's where we get to know you through some of your favorite things. So our first thing we'd like to know about you is, what's your favorite book?
I would say a very important book that I have read recently was one called Your Brain is a Time Machine by Dean Bonomanu. It's a book that talks about the potentiality our brain has to predict what's going to happen in the future based on the information that we have received in the past. And I think that that's fantastic to think that our brain can allow us to travel, forward in time or backwards with our memories.
That's an interesting way of, I guess, understanding how we think. I guess it's like pattern recognition, right? Sort of understanding what's happening now to see what's going to happen in the future. Wow, interesting. Yeah. And has there been a movie that you've enjoyed recently?
I would say Marvel movies, like the rest of the world. But yeah, I am a sci-fi geek, if you like.
Is there one that you've watched recently that you really enjoyed? There was a Thor one that came out recently, right?
Yeah, I think that was last year, right? And the most recent was Ant-Man.
I'm a bit behind, I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't worry.
And do you listen to any podcasts?
Yeah, I do actually. When I work out, I would like to utilize the time in learning at the same time. So one of my favorite podcasts is The Unexplainable by Vox Media. It's a great podcast. They talk about things that they're very hard to give an explanation, and scientists and experts try to figure out and share this information with the public.
Interesting. What's a topic that they spoke about recently?
Yesterday they were talking about pregnancy, actually, and the fact that when a mother has a child, some cells from the child stay inside the mother for the rest of her life, and vice versa.
Wow.
Some cells of the mother are staying inside the baby or the child for the rest of the life. So they
Oh, I didn't
exchange
know
some kind
that.
of cells there. Yeah, it was really interesting to learn that those kind of cells are like cells that they can form in something else. So scientists, they have found that they may help the mother recover. But at the same time, they have also found information that it may cause some problem depending the individual.
Interesting. I'll have to listen to that.
Yeah.
Learn a little bit more about pregnancy and cells.
Yeah.
And do you have a role model?
Not really. I don't know. Our parents.
Yeah, I do find this question difficult for myself. I don't think I have a real role model, so I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. No one is perfect. Even, I'm not perfect. My parents are not perfect, but I love them and I understand that we are humans and we make mistakes. So I don't know if I have, a person that I idolize and think that it's, a role model to follow.
Interesting. And what about a course that has inspired you? Have you completed any?
I have completed many courses, but now for some reason I don't remember any of them. But yeah, in each course that I take, I learn something new and, I evolve as a person, as an expert in the field.
Great. Yeah, I think that's great to hear. I guess you're taking the courses for a reason. You'd have hoped to get something out of it.
Always.
So how do you define home organization?
Personally, for me, home organization is when you keep your indoor environment clean, but in a sense that not like you are cleaning constantly your apartment, but you have a flow of things and that they will allow you to work throughout the day and not creating an issue for you inside your living space, right? For example, I have a specific place to put certain things that I know, and I rely on that specific flow in order to do a specific task without spending too much time trying to find out where was what.
Mm-hmm. And I guess part of that is making sure that your home environment works for you and is safe for you. So moving on to our topic for today, what is home ventilation and why is it important that we know what it is?
Mm-hmm. It's a tricky subject, and most people think that ventilation is once you feel a breeze of air coming towards you. But, that may be recirculated air, which in that case, it's not ventilated. Ventilated indoor air is when you bring outdoor air indoors. You may filter this air, treat it by adjusting its temperature and humidity. But in some other cases, we just, push outdoor air indoors in order to dilute some of the contaminants that they have built up inside the indoor spaces.
Okay, so you're saying that inside we have contaminants. Where do they come from?
Well, there are many sources. They may come from the outdoor environment. Let's say if I leave the window opened, maybe it's spring, I will have some pollen coming inside my house. For some people, this is a contaminant. For some other people, this is just particles that they float there. But then if we talk about sources from indoor environments, cooking is a great source of pollution indoors, especially if you cook with wood burners or gas stoves, because the process of burning, fossil fuel is going to create pollutants. But also during the process of cooking, like let's say frying food, it's going to release lots of particles in the environment.
I've definitely experienced. Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and we have other sources as well, like from the friction from our clothes, we will create some particles. And then depending the materials we use for our furniture and carpets and, bed sheets, we may also experience different levels of chemicals. They are called VOCs, volatile organic compound. And the number one source of air pollution is, are humans, because we exhale air, and during the metabolic process we produce lots of CO2, carbon dioxide, and it builds up inside closed environments.
Interesting. I mean, I've seen the TV shows where they, are trapped, underwater, and every breath they take, they are getting closer to running out of oxygen. But is that something that's likely to happen in a normal home where you just breathe enough and there's not enough ventilation that you're going to run out of oxygen?
No, this is not the case. In most cases, when we expel air, it's like 38,000 micrograms 38,000 ppm, parts per million. So I forgot the measuring. But it very fastly gets diluted with the rest of the air, and it comes down to like 500 parts per million in a distance of 2 meters or something. But it gets accumulated over time, and depending also the activity you are doing, you may produce more CO2 less, right? If you work out indoors, you're going to produce more CO2. We are not going to run out of oxygen, but it affects our cognitive abilities, because after a certain amount of CO2 inside buildings, our brain gets foggy.
And how likely is it that that will happen?
Really, actually common. I have done some experience in my houses. In my house, let's say in singular, I have various houses, but in singular, I have done an experiment where I have seen that, during night sleep, where our breath patterns are in most cases steady, I tend to overpass the 2,000 parts per million in CO2 concentration in my house, in a 60 square meter house. And the next day you wake up feeling not very refreshed, not like you have rest well. So what I do in my case is I will always leave a window open in order to bring fresh air from indoors. But it's not always possible, because if the pollution outside is, worse than indoors, then you create a different problem for your indoor environment. It's a bit complicated, and you have to have some instruments in order to measure the air quality indoors and outdoors in order to understand what's going on.
That's so interesting. I had no idea that you could, I guess, affect the quality of your air so easily just with breathing. I thought it would, you'd have to sort of seal yourself into like a little capsule or something to make that happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, we talk about indoor generations, and we spend most of our times indoors, but we are creating some issues by sealing our houses from the exterior environments, because we don't allow fresh air to come inside and dilute some of the, pollutants. You're not gonna die from CO2 concentrations, at least not in the earth. Astronauts, for example, may die from CO2 because inside the space stations, CO2 doesn't move the same way as it moves here in the earth due to gravity. And it tends to stay around the astronauts. So eventually they may choke because it doesn't get diluted the same way like here on Earth.
Interesting. I didn't know that. That's so, I'm going to think about that for ages now. Just bubbles of CO2 around astronauts.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. So they have to push the air with ventilation, ventilators around the station.
Okay. So that's sort of one way that, the indoor air quality can affect us. But you did mention some other pollutants, and then and so I'm wondering how they contribute to our health and our well-being.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, there are many of them. Let's say particulate pollution. It affects the human body, from the toes to our head. Literally, it can reach our brain. It can create many issues with our heart. And, the smaller the particles are, the deeper they're gonna go inside us and eventually create issues. And also depending, there are many types of particles out there, right? Like I mentioned earlier, we may produce particles by friction, like our clothes, but also we can create particles by burning gas. So the particles coming from a gas stove are gonna be more, they're gonna have a greater impact in our health than the particles from our clothes, because of their natural, of their chemistry as well, and how they are going to react with our cells once they are deposited inside us.
Is that carbon monoxide?
No, just carbon, pure carbon.
Okay. And,
Carbon monoxide it's a gas, and it's going to affect, again, us in a different way. Let's say if we compare carbon dioxide with carbon monoxide can kill you instantly in a very small dose, but carbon dioxide is just gonna make you, feel dizzy, or maybe not as smart as the rest of the days.
Interesting. Okay. And so how do can the particles that we caused by our clothes rubbing together, that friction, can that affect us, or that's sort of a lesser worry?
It may affect some people with allergies, right? But it's not going to create a huge problem for our health. And in most cases, those type of particles are in a certain diameter of, or in the scale of the different particles that we have out there. And I don't think more research is needed, let's say that. But I don't think personally they are going to create any, major health issues.
Okay. So what are the ones that we should be most worried about? Which ones should we be looking for?
It's very hard to say my environment has this specific amount of particles from this source, because we tend to measure everything, and everything gets to be in the same category once they're measured. But yeah, we definitely have to find ways to decarbonize our lives and remove everything that may produce particles or carbon dioxide by burning eventually.
Okay. So how do we do that? How do we, I guess, first know that they're there and know what we need to worry about?
Yeah, so for indoor spaces, we have to remove wood stoves. They are a great hazard for our health, for our own building, our own home, but also for the neighbors, because they create huge problem for the communities. And then if you have gas stoves, again, you have to replace them with some kind of induction cooking devices. And that's let's say the easiest way to remove carbon from your indoor environment.
So let's say you don't want to get rid of the gas stove because, you think that cooking with gas is just so much better. Would having a really great exhaust fan help with that? Or is that only helping a little bit?
Yeah, it definitely helps. But again, you're pushing this kind of pollution outside your house, maybe to a neighbor. And I don't know, I think we should be careful and considerate where do we, expel the pollution towards. And let me also tell you that in most cases, that pollution is going to come inside your house as well, because we may have a window open, or we may have, the HVAC system working, and it may suck the pollution back inside your house.
So it's not great for our neighbors, it's not great for the environment, and it's also still not great for us.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And how do we know that it is a problem? Can we buy a device online to test it?
Yeah, nowadays you can find lots of devices out there that they measure different pollutants, particles, carbon dioxide, VOCs. And in most cases, they are cheap devices that you can install in your house and measure the indoor air quality.
And then I guess once you know what's around your house, then you can start investigating what's causing the different pollutants and getting rid of them.
If we talk about the outdoor environment, it's very difficult to mitigate the pollution that is coming from someone else in most cases. So this is the reason I think we have to be, considerate about our neighbor, because as we don't want to breathe, pollutants from their house, we shouldn't, pollute them with pollution from our house. But from indoor perspective, we can definitely measure it and then take some decisions based on the data that we have gathered over time.
Okay. So what are some other ways that we can improve the indoor air quality?
Let's say by removing anything that has to do with, every product that says that is offering a fresh air indoors, air fresheners or perfumes indoors. Those kind of products are very bad for our health as well. In most cases, you will get a product like that and you will see at its back that it says it's hazardous for the environment. And you will see a dead fish or something or an X. And you have to think about that. If it kills the environment, it will kill you eventually as well at some point. Or it's going to create issues because they are bottles in most cases with lots of chemicals. VOCs are eventually smells and perfumes. And by releasing them consciously into your indoor environment, just because it smells nice, it doesn't mean it's good for you. Good air quality has to be odorless. You shouldn't smell anything. No lemon, no vanilla extract or whatever they may advertise. Your home should smell absolutely nothing.
Okay, so my diffuser is trying to kill me. Oh no.
Well, I guess you mentioned now diffuser, and are you using any kind of essential oils? Okay, there are many types of essential oils out there. You will find the organic ones or chemically made essential oils. Which one do you use?
I believe that they are the organic ones.
Okay. So even the organic ones, unfortunately, I'm so sorry to tell you that, are not a good choice because we talk about very concentrate amount of perfume or substances. Eventually, they are chemicals again, and they are VOC, some of them, and they are in such a high concentration that it's not good for you to smell them constantly. You can turn your device on, I don't know, once a week if you like, but don't have it like 24 hours running there with essential oil. And there is another issue with the diffusers. It's that they release also particulates into the environment, especially if you use tap water.
Yeah.
And the reason is because tap water has many minerals, and eventually you are creating particles from the minerals that they are inside the water.
But I assume that those particles would be in nature anyway, because I use that tap water to water my plants, and I drink that. So doesn't it sort of get into the environment anyway?
So in the environment, you will find, the natural process of evaporation where particles stay, well, the minerals, they stay back on the water. They don't get on the environment. And when you force them with a diffuser into your indoor environment, you are giving them a different route of digestion, let's say, into your body, because eventually you are breathing them and you are depositing them inside your lungs, instead your belly, where you can process them.
Ah, interesting. So it's like, it's okay to drink calcium in water. I assume there's calcium. But you don't want that in your lungs.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
I've never thought of that.
Yeah.
And can that type of thing cause any like health problems? Like respiratory issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially to, younger age or elderly, that, their lung capacity is not ready yet for, the young or for the elderly. It's compromised over time. They may feel the effects of that kind of pollution faster than you and I, that we are, in our 30s, I would say, but I think you are younger than 30s. But yeah, so absolutely. And over time, if you imagine breathing every day the same air, like the same amount of particles for the rest of your life for a prolonged period of time, you will eventually feel the effects of those minerals in your lungs.
Okay, but what about if I buy some fresh flowers that have a nice fragrance in them? Is that okay to have in our house?
Yeah, as long as they are not, fumigated with pesticides. Absolutely.
Okay, so we can have some nice smelling things in our house.
Yeah.
Okay, great to hear. I guess unless you're allergic to them, in which case not great.
Right.
So I guess, removing or not having those things in the house is the first step. Would you recommend the use of like air purifiers, or you mentioned before an HVAC system, to improve the air quality of your house as well?
Yeah. So I have in my house, for example, air purifiers, because it's the only way that I can manage some of the pollution that may come from outside when I want to ventilate my house. Right now I'm in Spain. South of Spain, we don't have HVAC systems here. So we rely on natural ventilation. So we have to open a window. And during winter months, we have a huge problem here with wood stoves. So eventually, once you open a window or once you go outside, you will smell smoke. And if I want to dilute carbon dioxide inside my house, there is no other way for me except opening the window. And now here it's coming what I have mentioned earlier, and also part of the book that I mentioned, your brain is a time machine. You have to find patterns and find out when is the right time to ventilate your house, in my case, with natural means. So based on the information that I get from the air quality monitors, because I have indoor and outdoor air quality monitors, I decide based on what I have seen in the previous days when I can open the window in order to ventilate my house.
Okay. And you said that you're an engineer, so I imagine that you would have a really sophisticated system for managing that. I'm just guessing. Is that true?
No, well, unfortunately, no here in Spain, because again, I rely on natural ventilation, so I manually have to open a window, right? But I do have set automations through the air quality monitors and purification system, the indoor purification system, in order to turn it on once there is, a certain threshold of particles that they are detected inside my environment.
Okay, interesting. And would you recommend using these tools, or is there anything else you'd recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also share everything on my blog, where I have, written countless articles about how I manage everything and, different products that they are available out there may offer help to some individuals.
Perfect. That's great, because it's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing for people to actually be able to go and see what products you recommend. So thank you for that. We'll make sure to link to your blog in the show notes so people can find it.
Excellent. Thank you.
So was there anything that we missed that you'd like to talk about?
It's at first it seems very complicated, right? Lots of things to consider. It's not like turning off or turning on a device and you are okay. You have to consider what's the air quality outside, what's the air quality inside, and take decisions upon that kind of information. And it's a work, hard work at the beginning, but eventually I think it pays off because you feel better by having better indoor air quality. You make sure your family as well stays healthy in the same process. Like earlier you mentioned about using an extractor to, push the pollution outside of the house during cooking. But at the same time, there are some other things that we can do, like always use a lid when we cook and don't have, the pans and sauces open, because they are able to release more particles that way. But by, closing the lid, you just trap everything inside. Something is going to escape, obviously, but you are reducing the amount, and this is very important. And trying to keep your house clean and organized also helps with, keeping the indoor air quality as well checked. Don't buy, cheap furniture, because in most cases they are glued with some specific kind of chemicals which they gas off over time. They gas off VOCs, and it's not something good for us. And in case you buy something like that, I would say leave it outside your house, maybe exposed to the sunlight for some period of time. That way you are going to accelerate the gas off, and once you bring it inside, it's gonna be less potent.
Okay, interesting. So what kind of furniture should we buy then?
Real wood furniture are the best, but again, we have to be very careful about the varnish that they have used to polish that kind of wood. So always check the labels for low VOC furniture and also low VOC paints that you may use in your house.
Okay, great to know. Thank you. So what about in your own home? What's a practice that you do to manage the air quality?
Yeah, the same thing like I mentioned earlier. I have indoor and outdoor air quality monitors, and based on the patterns that I discover over time, I take decisions when I have to ventilate my house, and also when it is safe for me to open the window and just bring some clean air inside.
Okay. Great, thank you. So the open mic section is a chance for you to talk about something that you're passionate about, and it's not necessarily related to the topic. Did you have something that you wanted to talk about today?
Well, I will focus again on air quality, maybe this time on air quality standards. Mm-hmm. I think there are so many air quality standards all over the world right now. In most cases, we talk about outdoor air quality standards that are made by the environmental agencies, like, let's say, the US EPA or the European Union Environmental Agency. Maybe in Australia, you have your own agency as well. Each country has its own thing. And although they try to communicate the same kind of information with the public, they use different numbers, different colors, different wordings, and different thresholds to describe how good or bad air quality is. And sometimes it makes you wonder, why am I subject of different air quality standards just because I live in a specific country? And why someone in a different country has better standards, let's say with tougher thresholds than in my country. And I think that this is not fair for anyone. We are all humans. We are all have the same needs for clean air. And we have to find another way to tackle that problem. Then another issue is that we bring those outdoor air quality standards in indoor environments with the same thresholds, etc., which again I think is a huge mistake. Just because in indoor environments, the chemistry is different of the pollutants, but also the time we spend indoors is higher than the time we spend outdoors. Outdoors, we spend only 13% of our time. Indoors, we spend 87% of our time. And when I say indoor, I mean in your house, in your office, in your gym, including inside your car, if you have one. And we have to figure out how to come up with better indoor air quality standards. Something else that we have to consider is that, for example, in a gym, I will process 9,000 liters of air in an hour, but in my office, I will process only 480 liters of air for the same amount of time. So should the air quality standards be the same inside the gym and inside the office? I don't think so, personally. So again, I think we have to come up with better and more universal ways to describe air pollution and air quality in indoor and outdoor environments. It doesn't matter where we are, because as I mentioned earlier, we all have the same needs for clean air.
And how do you propose that we do this?
There are many experts around the world. I know many of them. I think we have to sit down all together and create some open framework in order to start building on top of that and improving it, over time by implementing maybe different parameters or different ways to communicate information back to the public. But I don't think it's a responsibility just of one state or one country to do that. It's something that has to be done by, everyone in a global scale. WHO, for example, the World Health Organization, has tried to develop the air quality guidelines, which I like, but again, it's not something that they enforce. It's like a guideline, so you can take it or leave it. And unfortunately, in most cases, due to the lack of pressure, they just don't implement the higher standards from their development.
So maybe an odd question, but do you have a country or a set of standards that you think is sort of the tip-top number one?
Well, definitely it's not Europe. Let's say that. They are trying to do better job at the moment, but I don't like what they are offering at the moment. WHO's guidelines, I think they are what we have to follow. But again, we have to adapt them for indoor spaces for all the previous reasons that I mentioned.
Would you say that most countries don't have a good enough air quality standard?
Another problem is that countries have their own agendas. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean that if a country, for example, produces lots of petroleum, they may release a specific type of pollutant, let's say sulfur dioxide. So in their guidelines or in their standards for air quality, they may be more relaxed with what they consider, safe amount of air pollutant exposure. So it's very difficult, and each country has its own agenda, like I mentioned, and it's very complicated. Some of them they measure specific pollutants, some others they don't measure them. So it's
okay. So most countries, if not all of them, have to improve in some way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's not reassuring.
But like we always say, knowing that we have a problem, it's the first step towards fixing the issue.
Okay, well, I hope we fix this issue because I think it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned before that you have a blog. Was there any other ways that you wanted people to find you if they want to, talk to you or find out more about you?
Yeah, I'm very active on social media is
Mm-hmm.
due to my efforts to educate the public. So they can find me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook as well. But I don't use it so much. Yeah, I'm active there. Instagram as well. And yeah, they can also find me on my blog where they can communicate with me directly as well. They can send me a private message like many people do. They try to figure out what's going on with their indoor environment or outdoor environment, and they just reach me in a manner to help them, mitigate or understanding better their issue.
Oh, that's great that they have the opportunity to talk to you
Yeah,
as well. So thank you for that.
you're
And
welcome.
thank you. We'll pop all those links in the show notes so people can find you so they can ask you lots of questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it was an absolutely joy for me and able to share some of my latest thoughts on air quality as well.
Yeah,
So thank you for that.
Great. You've been listening to Room by Room, produced by the Home Organisation Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, and any other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating, sharing, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people to find it so we can grow and continue to bring you quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website, ho.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Joustra, and thanks for tuning in.